High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on Better Sports Network.
Happy NFL schedule release day, everybody. It is out. Well, I shouldn't say it's out yet. I mean, their stuff has been trickling out over the course of the day. We found out some stuff yesterday as well. If we have anything fantasy noteworthy to bring you, we definitely will. Fantasy Football Show. Welcome in. I am from the Fantasy Football Players Championship, the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, and of course the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown at Eric Balkman on Twitter if you want to connect with me there. We got a great show for you tonight. Before we get started, I do want to remind everybody that you can win $1 million in the inaugural Fantasy Pros Championship at just a $350 entry fee at myffpc.com. You can register by June 1st. Or if you want, I should say, if you want to register by June 1st, this tournament will be going on all summer. But if you do register by June 1st and draft by June 15th, you will get a free $35 league credit. You do it up to 3 times, you'll get up to 3 credits. So you're looking at well over $100 in free FFPC teams when you take your shot at the first ever $1 million grand prize in the Fantasy Pros Championship. This $350 tournament we've been doing for years is the first year that Fantasy Pros has partnered with us on it, and it's been awesome so far. It's going to be awesome all summer. It is officially your summer of drafting. You can also, if you're looking for some other action too, we have plenty of other redraft tournaments going on. We have the FFPC main event, $1 million grand, that's going on there. And that's something we offered for the first time last year. Here's why you want to sign up by the end of the month here. Sign up by May 31st, and then you will be entered into the illustrious Pros versus Joes drawing, where we will we will randomly pick 42 teams that register for the FFP by May 31st. And once we pick those names out of there, then you'll be randomly slotted to compete in a 12-team league with 5 other Joes like you, and then against 6 industry pros, many of whom you've seen on this show before too. So that is why you want to register for that, and you can win $1 million too. Do that at myffpc.com. Of course, the FFPC Best Ball Tournament is going on right now as well. $200,000 grand prize. You can win that there. Or if you want to just plunk down $35 in the Superflex Best Ball Tournament, we still have $50,000 up for grabs there. $125 entry in that FFPC Best Ball Tournament. If you want to play in those closed 12-team leagues, we totally get it. You can play in slow drafts, live drafts, sit and go best ball options, 30-second, 2-hour, 60-second, 6-hour timers, all at myffpc.com for all the drafts that you want to sign up for there. And you can play for as low as $5 there. So fantasy football for $5. You cannot beat that. We have a jam-packed show tonight, ladies and gentlemen. We have a couple, for the first time ever in the history of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network, we have 2 co-hosts tonight. So coming up in the second hour, we have Scott Connor from Destination, also of him from Dynasty and Chill, the Dynasty and Chill podcast. He's also doing the Dynasty League football thing. So you can check out all of his Dynasty League content at DLF Football there. And we're going to be talking with him about how his FFPC rookie drafts have been going, how his Dynasty drafts have been going, and some other nuggets you should know about running your Dynasty teams. That's coming up in hour number 2. Before we get to him, I do want to talk about introducing our first guest co-host tonight, ladies and gentlemen, a NFL draft wunderkind, as it were, a guy who knows everything there is to know about the NFL draft and probably a little bit more. He is an NFL draft and college football analyst for Fantasy Pros and Betting Pros. You know him as an FSWA award winner. You follow him on Twitter at Thorku, making his debut here on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. It's Thor Nystrom. Thor, welcome in, man.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
I'm excited to have you on, and I'm leading you off with some Viking stuff tonight. And I had a little bit of nervousness bringing you on because I'm in Northeast Wisconsin,
Uh-oh.
and while I don't classify myself as a Packers fan, I do follow the team quite a bit. I have another local radio show where we cover the Packers quite a bit. But it's good to have a foil on.
Yeah.
And it's good to have somebody on that can talk unbiasedly about the Vikings, the Packers. This, as much as credit I'm giving you, you did rank Jordan Love as the number 11 quarterback in the NFC North.
So one spot behind Kevin O'Connell.
Behind Kevin O'Connell, which was so great. And it's so funny too, because I see that and I know what you're doing, and it's hilarious. And there's still 80%, maybe not 80%, 70% of Twitter doesn't get it. And then the reaction is just it's just that much more.
Welcome. Thanks, man. Yeah, I even had a buddy in town that texted me that tweet, and then he was like, "Are you serious, or did you really don't Love that much, or are you?" And I was like, "Bro, I'm effing kidding. It's a joke. I don't actually think Jordan Love is a worse quarterback than Kevin O'Connell right this minute. It was a joke. Yeah."
It's so funny. It's one of those things. If you know, you know. I loved it. I thought it was great.
Appreciate it.
Okay, so let's get into your Vikings here, because there's a couple of names I want to lead off with, and number one is Jordan Addison, who went in the first round of the NFL draft. Jordan Addison, a guy who crushed it at Pittsburgh, came out to USC, and it was kind of fair to Midland out there with Caleb Williams. So obviously his best years were when he was winning the Blitnikoff at Pitt. Can you tell me a little bit about why some people might be overrating his struggles at USC, and then more importantly, what can he do for Dynasty fantasy football owners, knowing that he is going to be playing opposite Justin Jefferson in that Vikings offense?
Yeah, well, he's going to get a lot of targets next year, right from the jump. A lot of obviously receptions, yards, the fantasy stats, etc. Of course, he is already carved into stone into the starting lineup. You're going to have 12 personnel, right? So he has to play on the boundary with the Vikings. And that's, you were alluding to, wasn't quite as good last year for USC as he was for Pitt. Well, one of the differences is he played predominantly slot at Pitt. Then he switched to the boundary at USC. He was still good, but he was also nicked up, missed a couple games, whatnot. But yeah, I'm not concerned about him playing on the boundary in the NFL, because he's good off the line because of the footwork and different stuff like that. And then an awesome route runner. That is his thing. He had a comment after he got drafted that he views running routes like painting portraits, which I thought was funny. You think about with Addison as Bob Ross or something. But that's what he does. He introduces doubt into the defender's head. They don't know when he's going to break off the route break, and then he just does it suddenly, and he can sort of fold the clean corner out to whatever side, whatever, and he accelerates out of it quick. One of the reasons that he was the fourth of those receivers to go, it's obviously he's a skinny kid. He's on the smaller side. And then you have that in conjunction with not being an elite athlete by the testing. I do think there's data to suggest that he is a better athlete on the field than he was in those pre-draft tests. They're one of the tracking systems had his on-field play speed 90th percentile. He obviously has the acceleration as well, which is one. I suppose the 10-yard split sort of indicates that a little bit, but the on-field acceleration and deceleration a little bit different. He's really good at both those as well. So yeah, it's a really good fit for the Vikings. They needed that number 2 receiver that could consistently beat single coverage, because otherwise defense are going to keep doing what every defense did to the Vikings after the opener last year, when Jefferson just carved up the Packers. After that, it was 17 straight games of double teaming and or bracketing Justin Jefferson, because Thielen couldn't beat the single coverage on the other side. Addison is going to. So now you're going to have to pick your poison a little bit more as the opposing defense.
In the Fantasy Pros Championship, ADP I'm looking at right now, Jordan Addison, this is since the NFL draft, Thor. He's going off as the 39th wide receiver in the early 8th round. So he's going behind guys like Marquise Brown, George Pickens, Kadarius Toney. He's ahead of fellow rookie Quentin Johnston and Jahan Dotson as well. Does that seem fair for you? Because, I mean, like you just said, he's not going to get a lot of targets this year, but when you're considering that he's a fringe top 40 receiver at this point, is he going to put up enough volume, enough numbers in Minnesota his rookie year to warrant an early 8th round pick?
I was going to say that I would bet my life that he has a better fantasy season than Kadarius Toney, but that undersells how confident I am. I will bet my soul the rest of however long this goes, infinity, that he has a better season than Kadarius Toney. That is a given. I put him above Pickens too. Yeah, I mean, like I do think that undersells it a bit because you have the high volume passing offense, and he's the only other receiver on the field outside of Justin Jefferson. And he's in the most advantageous situation in football as a receiver, which Adam Thielen was in last year. The guy playing across from Justin Jefferson. You will always have the CB2 on you. You will never be double teamed. You will never be bracketed. That like the attention is all going the other way because Jefferson is like a gravitational pull type player. So yeah, I mean, he's going to outperform 39 for sure.
So I look at what the Vikings are able to do. I like Kirk Cousins throwing to both Jefferson and Addison and Hawkinson too in that offense. I know there's a lot of people that were kind of like, hey, maybe this will be KJ Osborne's year. This was before the NFL draft. And now we're kind of looking at him. He's kind of an afterthought in this offense. I mean, at best, he's the fourth receiving option. Maybe he's the fifth receiving option. Is Osborne here, Thor?
Yeah, I mean, like in the base offense, Josh Oliver is like, I don't know if they're intending to play Oliver or Hawkinson in the slot, but one of them, inline slot, whatever. Like, yeah, I mean, Osborne's not going to be a starter. They will, like they want to be multiple and mix and match formation, different stuff like that. So like, he's going to play more. It's not like he's just going to be, stuck to the bench. Certainly he will be on the field in true 3 wide receiver sets. And he's also, I assume, going to come in and spell Addison. Like, you're not taking Jefferson off the field, but yeah, like his snaps are certainly going to be mitigated for those reasons. And the Vikings have clearly decided, like, we're going to a 12 personnel base, which if you're the third wide receiver in an offense like that, yeah, like you got to come in off the bench. You're not going to play as many snaps. So just is what it is.
Moving on to the Vikings backfield here. We heard rumors, an innuendo that Dalvin Cook was either going to be traded or released. That has not happened yet. However, Alexander Mattison scored himself a 2-year contract. So he is definitely going to be in that backfield. I had a couple of buddies that were big Tyson Chandler fans prior to the draft last year, and then they liked the spot. And who's the kid there, the kick returner? That Kenny
Wangu.
Ngwangu. Thank you. He's still there as well. And then the Vikings in the 7th round, Thor, 222nd overall pick. They take a guy out of UAB, and I want to get your thoughts on what you thought of DeWayne McBride prior to the NFL draft. And then I want to get into his landing spot as well, because I know a lot of people were, watch out for this guy because he could be a difference maker, even if he's a late day 3 pick, which is what he was. Can you kind of guide us and as far as fantasy owners go, knowing what we should know about this Vikings backfield as drafting season picks up in the Fantasy Pros Championship, as well as what you think DeWayne McBride does to this backfield?
Yeah, so Dalvin Cook has 1, 2. He will be a Viking for 3 more weeks. I think 3 weeks from today is when you're going to get the announcement on that. He will not be on the Vikings next season. As far as the rest of it, so you have the backfield, it's Madison, Chandler, like you mentioned. I never heard. That was actually the first time that I'd ever been like, oh yeah, Tyson Chandler. Like I'd never even thought of that. The basketball player, whatever.
Right.
Like so, you got Chandler, and then it's going to be McBride. Like Wangu, he's on the roster for his return utility, and if one of these guys that they brought in, like UDFA, beats him out for they signed Malik Knowles from Kansas State, pretty good returner. They have a couple other guys that can do it. One of them beats him out. He, even in the Dalvin Cook less backfield, he would still be at risk of losing his job because that's what his utility is. But so you have the top 3 dudes. To your point about Danny McBride, he's going to play right away. To what degree that is still to be sorted out, but he is absolutely a sleeper for fantasy. Like people just don't realize it yet because they're like, oh, if Dalvin Cook is not going to be on the roster next season. Don't even think about Dalvin Cook. That's done. It's the 3 guys, Madison, Chandler, and McBride, and like you start to think about how those 3 guys' skill set works. Like when you're thinking about them together. I think McBride is the best early down grinder of those 3 guys. I think he's going to win that. I think he will win that job. He is unplayable on passing downs, which is one of the reasons why he fell down the board. Of course, and then he's jumping up from the G5. But that kid is a super skilled runner. over the history of PFF charting, 9 years, you look at the career force missed tackle. How do you say force missed tackle rate? He is number 3 over the 9 years. The only 2 guys ahead of him are Bijan Robinson and Javonte Williams. That speaks for itself. I love the way he runs. He's super duper tough kid. He's one of them guys that runs like breakneck. Like he doesn't care. And he keeps those legs churning until he's on his back looking up at the sky. He has some of the funnest highlights that you'll see with that stuff. Like one play where he got flipped up in the air. He sort of flips feet overhead, somehow lands on his feet. And then the deep was what? And he ends up getting 4 or 5 more yards just because it was what the hell? But he has runs like that because he doesn't, it's like I said, it's just full speed at all times. Like the play strength, it's not like joystick agility, but he's one of those guys, hard cut, violent cut guy. And then one of those guys that can sort of change the angle of the defender, right on the doorstep to turn a flush, tackle attempt into an arm tackle attempt or an off angle attempt or whatever. He's going to run through that. So that's the stuff you like about him. The hands are the question with him. Again, I don't think he's playable on pass, literally, all hope dies here because it's not just that they didn't use him like that at UAB. There are anecdotal there's other reasons to suggest why that was the case. Namely, he has a fumbling problem. And so there's real reasons to believe that his hands are that's his sort of bugaboo or whatever. The ball security thing needs to improve. But I think the NFL coaches can help with that. Some of those fumbles occurred because he wouldn't quit on a rep. Where other running backs would go down, he's just I'm not going down. And he's fighting for an extra yard or 2. And then the ball gets poked out, different stuff like that. I think you can work on him with that. And I think you can also work on him with, defender coming this way, the ball needs to be in this hand. If you're in the tight quarters and, you're not sure, maybe put 2 hands on it. I think that they can work on him with that or Dwayne, just when you're dead to rights, maybe just go down. We love the way you run, but maybe just go down and don't give the defense an opportunity, someone to come from behind you and punch that thing out. But again, just in terms of the skill of the early down meat and potato stuff, I think he's better than the other 2. Certainly the other 2 guys are going to play on the passing downs, and there will be a platoonish thing, but I think people are sleeping on his ability to come in and get on the field right away.
And I think part of that reason too is we have not, myself included, have not woken up to the fact that Dalvin Cook is not going to be on this roster going forward. So to hear such a resounding fact from you, a guy who was right on who the first tight end was going to be picked in the NFL draft, we're going to listen to you and treat it as gospel. More to come on that in the next segment. I don't want to put words in your mouth here, Thor, but Dwayne McBride, and by the way, I misspoke before. I must have NBA playoffs in the line. It's not Tyson Chandler. It's Tykevius Chandler, known as Ty Chandler. So yeah. I don't know what I was thinking there, but
no, I appreciate it because I actually never made that connection before. Yeah.
Because it wasn't his name. That's why. All right. Anyway, McBride is going in the 16th round of the Fantasy Pros Championship draft. He's a 65th running back off the board. Chandler is not being picked at all. And obviously in this format where it's full PPR, when you're looking at a late round running back, Thor, would you rather pick up McBride given that he is the best first and second down guy that they have? Or would you rather go for a pass catcher like Chandler? Madison is going, I'll look up his ADP in a second, but he's going way higher than both those guys. But as far as a late round sleeper for Vikings running backs, would you rather have McBride or Chandler late?
I think I would rather have McBride. PPR complicates it just a bit. Because I do think Chandler is going to get some receiving work that McBride's not. But yeah, I think that McBride, I think he'll out-touch him next year. And certainly we're talking about the meat and potato stuff, but in that world, the post-Dalvin world, he's going to be the best goal line back too. So he gonna vulture that sort of stuff. I think I would take McBride over, and both those guys, especially being PPR with Chandler, both those guys are being like it. See, I guess the public doesn't realize that Dalvin Cook's not going to be on the team next year, but like they're both super or underrated in that thing. They should be going higher than that. Yeah.
Also in the Fantasy Pros Championship, Alexander Madison is going at the 2-3 turn. Given what you've just shared about Chandler and McBride, would you be staying away from Madison given that price?
Like the end of the second round?
End of the second round, running back 18. That's where he's going right now.
That seems rich.
So you'd be staying away, which is fine.
Yeah, that's like, but when you told me the other two guys, it was like, oh, I guess people just don't realize that Cook's going to be gone, but like, apparently they do because feels like they're super overrating Madison. Like Madison, he's certainly going to play, right? Like he's absolutely going to, and he's like, he had the down season with the receiving, but like that kid can catch. He's just not explosive, right? Like, so like, I don't care about the off season with the receiving. Like I trust his hands, he has long arms, big catch radius, whatnot. But like, I think I don't know. Like I wouldn't be viewing him as like the starter, even when Dalvin Cook's not going to be on that roster, because I don't think Alexander Madison's not going to be like a bell cow. Like he's not a special back, like, I mean, he can do certain stuff, but like he's way better as a complimentary fella, which goes into my idea of like it'll be a platoon, but like McBride is, in my opinion, is going to win the early down stuff. So it's like, you're mixing and matching with some of the other stuff, but I just like, I know both those guys, well, all three of their games. I don't think that the other two are going to beat out McBride for that. Madison, in terms of that thing, is in my opinion, being overdrafted.
All right, Thor. And now that I let you answer that question, I am totally off my game tonight. I was looking at the rookie free agent Dynasty ADP. So Madison, that's where he was going there in the leagues he was still a free agent in. The Fantasy Pros redraft championship, running back 32 at the middle of the eighth round, which is a little bit more palatable, a little bit more acceptable, and maybe you're on board with him at that price then, right?
That's fairer.
But still a little high.
For me, it's just a little bit rich, even like with knowing that Dalvin gonna be gone, like, because I just think it's gonna be, and I think the way the Vikings want to do it and the way that all that sort of stuff, I think it's gonna be more of the straight timeshare. And I like Madison's the guy where I think he can do a little bit of the both, but like I don't know, there's just not one aspect of Madison's game where it's like, oh, he has to be this, like we got to get him on the field for the passing downs, or we have to get him on the field for the meat and potato stuff. Like, like again, like he's just okay, and he categorically lacks speed. So it's like, I hope the receiving thing turns around for him. That would certainly help next year, because that's that's something that they're going to need, whatnot. But I wouldn't even 32. For me, it would be more like with him maybe like late 30s. And then I'd have McBride way higher than he is, and probably Chandler a bit higher than he is.
The better boss joining you and Mel Kiper Jr. as being Dwayne McBride fans. Says he always falls forward, good power, shifty enough. He loves him. Yeah, and we love Thor Nystrom as we are continuing our NFC North conversation here. I want to stay in the backfield, but let's shift to Chicago in rookie drafts right now. Roschon Johnson in the FFPC Dynasty rookie drafts was going off the board on average as the number 7 running back at the 204. Now, there's a narrative out there, and I can't remember where the report came right out of Chicago. I mean, it was Ryan Poles or somebody saying that, they don't want a bell cow situation in Chicago. Are you buying that, Thor? Are you buying that they don't want a bell cow, that they want to mix things up with Deontay Foreman and Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson? And if you're not buying it, who's the Bears running back to target?
I'm not allowed to swear on this, am I?
No, I would caution you against doing that. Yes.
Frick, no, I'm not buying that. That's the exact same BS the Houston Texans were saying last year about, oh, we have Marlon Mack, we have Rex Burkhead, or whoever, and right? It was Rex Burkhead, the other on the Texans, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And like, oh, Damien's going to have to work in there. It's like, no, he's not. Like Dameon Pierce is better than those guys, and Roschon is better than these guys. It's funny. You find at the end of the day, the NFL teams prefer to play the better player. it's crazy. I know, but like,
it's a wild. It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's
it
see
sure
how it
is.
works out.
Yeah, and like they can say whatever they want now, but like they're going to play the best guy, and if the skill sets are close and they're complementary, like I'm like with the Vikings, right? Like there's not one guy out of those three that we were just talking about where it's like, oh, this guy's way better than the other dudes, whatever, or even like like a legitimate step up like across the board, like in the different metrics of it, but like Roshan is certainly better than the other two guys in everything but receiving. But very important caveat, he is a very good pass blocker. He is absolutely a better runner than the other two. That's no question. And he's a better pass blocker than them two. The receiving thing, like, yeah, if they want a running back who will be, running the routes on a specific concept, they're going to have to take him off the field. We didn't see much of that. I'm not super duper confident in that with him. But yeah, like Roshan is going to be starting for them. And I think he can be a bell cow. We just didn't get to see it at Texas because he was stuck behind Bijan Robinson. That was kind of unfortunate for him, but certainly flashed. And the another thing that he has going for him is, and this is another thing Dameon Pierce had going for him, he had way less tread on the tires. In Roshan's case, it was because he was stuck behind a generational talent. In Dameon Pierce's case, it was because he was stuck playing for Dan Mullen.
Another great point. So I'll just tell the viewers too, and you, obviously, Thor, you have Khalil Herbert being drafted as running back 33 at the 905. Then you have Roshan Johnson going off the board as running back 41 at the 1004. Deontay Foreman, running back 49 at the 1204. So none of them are being valued all that high, but clearly Roshan Johnson. And I think his ADP is going to creep up. I think people are going to catch a whiff of it. They're going to remember what the Texans said they were cooking back in last summer, and then realize it was a completely different souffle that they put on the table when the NFL season started. I think that's going to be the same dish that we're getting in Chicago. I want to get to one more NFC North point here before we move on. Jahmyr Gibbs and Sam Laporta, especially the Gibbs pick on day one of the NFL draft, I think was the buzz of Dynasty fantasy football players. Couldn't believe that he went as high as he did, 12th overall. But I think now that shock has worn off us, and knowing what the Lions have now done with Gibbs and Laporta, we have to move on to the new reality. And the new reality says that the Lions love Gibbs and the Lions love Laporta because they made him the second tight end off the board. Now, as fantasy players, Thor, when we look at Gibbs and Laporta, do we have to give these guys a bump up our rankings because we could see how much the Lions believe in them?
With Laporta, yeah. I mean, you haven't told me where they have him. I know he's going to be criminally underrated wherever it is. He should be going higher. Well, I can already say before I know the number.
And I'll tell you this: Fantasy Pros Championship has the FFPC scoring, so it's tight end premium. Sam Laporta, tight end 19. At the 1301, he is going behind Juwan Johnson, Tyler Higbee, and Irv Smith. God. He is going just ahead of Michael Mayer and Mike Gesicki. So, yeah, so you think, I mean, Laporta all day, every day, as long as he's at that price.
Yeah, he's going to be a top 10 fantasy tight end next year.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it just is what it is. He's going to get a lot of targets, and he's one of the best yak tight ends to enter the NFL over the last decade. And probably longer. I was mentioning the 9-year PFF charting era. During that time, Laporta, last season, he had 20 forced missed tackles. That's top 5 all-time single season in the FBS in the PFF charting era. There's 131 FBS teams. That's a lot of tight ends that played. And that's where he blew everyone else out. He was number 1 in the nation by margin. Like, he's just awesome at that. And the other thing about him is he actually creates separation. Like in the intermediate area, it is so difficult to stay with that kid because his sort of special sauce combination, he has agility with power. So and after the catch, he becomes like a tank that can like drive like a Ferrari as far as like the moving around and stuff like that. Like and the vision too, like he senses the bodies around him, and like he takes really for a tight end unorthodox paths down the field. like where he'll cut back against the grain, or he'll like, slow down a little bit and set someone up, and then he'll jut another way. Like you just don't see that. And then sometimes it takes like 3 dudes to wrestle that guy down. So like you have all that stuff. And again, like you can get him the ball to facilitate that yak because he opens up the throwing windows because of that agility in the intermediate area. With him, like, I don't know why people were sleeping on him. He was my tight end 3 from the beginning of the process all the way through to the end. Turns out even I was a bit low on him. Mayer was my second one, but yeah, like that stuff just speaks for his. And to go back to that, like I don't know if like 1-to-1 he projects all the way to like in line, like every single play. He can certainly do it, and he certainly gives effort as a blocker. But like against the bigger NFL like power edges, not sure that I want him in line when the run concept is going that way. But like he gets after it. He takes care of everyone in the slot, in terms of that stuff. Mm-hmm. But like the other thing that maybe, I don't know, like that comes out of the awful offensive environment with Iowa, although all the market share stuff just absolutely dominated it. And then, so you have that or whatever. And then he doesn't go down the field as much. But like Iowa's offense stunk. So I can't necessarily be like, I don't, but like Dalton Kincaid's better at that stuff. But like, there's no tight end in this class that I prefer more than him as far as get this guy the ball in the intermediate area. He's going to throw the throwing window open for you and then just watch him go. Like he's going to give Jared Goff so many free yards just by breaking tackles after he gets the ball. He's going to have a really good, like he's going to open up a lot of people's eyes next year.
And we'll get to see him in action. The first game of the NFL season against the Kansas City Chiefs Thursday night. Jahmyr Gibbs, last point I want to bring up here, running back 13 is where he's being drafted in the Fantasy Pros Championship. This is redraft, and you're looking at Gibbs just as a fringe running back 1 at this point. His ADP is at 309 right now. He's ahead of Travis Etienne, Kenneth Walker, and Aaron Jones. He's right behind Ramondre Stevenson and Najee Harris. You love Laporta, but I'm guessing you're probably not as all in on Jahmyr Gibbs as a lot of the fantasy players are.
Yeah, that's too high. Yeah, that needs to come down a bit. If it's PPR, I get it. Like, yep. Yeah, I mean, like he is going to get the receiving stats, whatnot, but you have to mitigate that kid's touches. I mean, like he's sub 200 pounds, and he returns kicks, and you're going to give him X amount of receptions per game. There's just not many touches left for the rushing unless you want to risk his health. Unless, which for fantasy players, of course, he misses a bunch of games that hurts too. So like you need to keep those touches beneath 20. And like they already have the plan for that, right? Like they have David Montgomery there, whatnot. But like Montgomery is going to be like when they get in the red zone, or well, specifically like inside the 10, inside the 5, certainly, Jahmyr Gibbs ain't going to be in there. Like that, they're going to give the ball to David Montgomery every single time. The short yardage stuff they're going to give them, the meat and potato stuff they're going to give to him. Like Jahmyr Gibbs is not great between the tackles. He's just not. But yeah, when he gets the ball in space, that's where it gets fun with him. And that's why you want to get him out in space as a receiver, different stuff like that. Certainly the running concepts outside the tackles, love that. But yeah, I mean, he's just not going to get a metric ton of touches. I don't think he gets a ton of touches inside the 10-yard line either. Like you said, he was going running back 13. It's running like 13, he's a platoon back his rookie season that will not get the touches near the goal line, and he will not have over 20 touches a game, like maybe in any game. So it's like that 13 is stupid.
I'll tell you what's not stupid is listening to everything Thor Nystrom has to say on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show here on the Better Sports Network. We're going to step out and take a quick 3-minute break. Come back. We're going to talk a little bit about the Baltimore Ravens offense now with more Zay Flowers. We're going to talk about how Thor knew Dalton Kincaid was going to be the first tight end going off the board of the NFL draft. And we're going to talk about that new Bryce Young to Jonathan Mingo connection in Carolina. Is there fantasy value there? Is there maybe not as much as we might think? That and more. He is Thor Nystrom from Fantasy Pros and Betting Pros. I'm Eric Balkman from the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. The RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown and the FFPC. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Show rolls on in 3 minutes. Don't go anywhere.
The High Stakes Fantasy Football Show with Eric Balkman.
Anybody who's watching this, getting ready for the rookie draft, so let's do an all-out blitz on this. Should you be drafting for need, or should you be drafting for talent? And I'll give you an example. Oftentimes, I have pretty good receivers. My receiver core is usually really good for my dynasty teams. My running back core, usually not so bueno. I don't know if I just focus on receivers and tight ends too much, but my running backs, I usually need players here. If I am sitting at like the 103, the 104, the 105, should I be, reaching on a guy like Zach Charbonnet? Or should I be looking at drafting guys like Jackson Smith-Njigba or Dalton Kincaid or Jordan Addison, stuff like that? How do you handle weighing drafting for need versus talent for rookie drafts, Pat?
Generally, I think it makes sense to go with the talent and, like talent over need. And I do think, best ball drafts are a little differently because you can't make moves in season. But in managed leagues, whether it's redraft or dynasty, I think positional balance is like the most overrated thing in fantasy. You can make trades, go with the talent, go with the value on the draft board, and worry about positional balance later on.
However you're invested in sports, from betting to fantasy, collectibles, and more, join our community on Better Sports Network.
It's High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on Better Sports Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, fantasy football best ball season is here. You can join a live draft and try to beat your favorite Fantasy Alarm analyst while talking about your picks and strategy live on the Better Sports Network. Sign up for a live draft on the Fantasy Alarm Discord today. Remember, you must have a Fantasy Alarm subscription to join. So visit fantasyalarm.com for subscription options, your dominance over the competition. I want to talk about the competition that is facing all the targets, or competition for targets that is facing all the major players in Baltimore. Lamar Jackson is back, and he's going to have Rashad Bateman, Mark Andrews, Odell Beckham, and the guy I want to talk about with Thor Nystrom from Fantasy Pros and Betting Pros right now is Zay Flowers. So let's talk a little bit about him. Number one, Thor, what you expect from him this first year in the NFL, and then obviously things could be different in 2024. And then I want you to talk about him from a dynasty perspective, what he does well and why we need to be paying attention to him for fantasy football purposes.
Yeah, I'm definitely not as bullish on him fantasy-wise as a rookie as, say, Jordan Addison, who we know is going to get a ton of targets. With Zay, like Baltimore for years, they had one, maybe two starting caliber NFL receivers on their roster. This year they got four. And Todd Monken and the air raid system, they probably needed that. That's why they went with Zay, despite their other wide receiver acquisitions. But I'm not sure that he's going to be on the field every single play. I do think he's going to win a starting job, but I think he'll get spelled, whether it's by Aguilar or however they do it. And Zay can play both inside and outside. Seems likely that he will be the slot receiver, but yeah, I don't think he's going to play there 100% of the time. And just thinking about the targets and different stuff like that. In terms of, him against some of these other rookie receivers in their situation, I'd put him, maybe on the lower end of those top four guys for rookie season fantasy wise.
And for dynasty purposes in FFPC leagues, he is the number 4 receiver going behind Smith-Njigba, Addison, and Johnston. Is that the way you'd have it if you were playing in a dynasty league and just could own these guys forever? Would you rather have those 3 other receivers ahead of Flowers?
I would. Yeah, that's exactly how I'd have it. Yeah, and I ranked Flowers above Addison in my draft rankings, but not by a ton on the overall board. It might have been 2 or 3 spots or whatever. But Addison is in such a better situation. That just sort of speaks for itself. I do like Zay, I like his game, the movement, especially. And again, I think he can play on the outside because of his footwork off the line, even though he's a smaller receiver, and he's really good at tracking the ball down the field for a smaller receiver. So those are, 2 things you look at in terms of that when it's could this smaller receiver project to the outside? So it gives him some versatility. In terms of that, but some mix and match stuff. But yeah, dynasty wise, that's exactly where I'd have him. I'd have him as wide receiver 4.
Prior to the NFL draft, you said on the national airwaves that Dalton Kincaid was going to be the first tight end off the board. You were correct in that assumption. Number 1, how did you know it? Number 2, this is more of a long drawn out question. I know his blocking, some analysts have said it's suspect. I want to get your thoughts on that. And for fantasy players, you know, we don't necessarily care about blocking, but we do to a certain point, because if you can't block, you're going to be on the field less. You're also, when you are on the field, other teams are going to know that it's going to be a passing down. But with how good Kincaid is and how good of a receiver and pass catcher and route runner he is, does it even matter if his blocking is suspect? Your thoughts?
Well, no, it does not. And his blocking is going to be fine. The reason why is he's a slot receiver. Like he can take care of the dude in the slot. What he can't do is you can't play him in line, right? Like even in the Pac-12, like, you know, it was like against edge rushers there. It's like, it's a little precarious the times he did it. You just don't do it in the NFL, and he ain't going to do it there. People just they don't understand. They'll get it once they start to see him, in the NFL in the games or not. But like what he is, it's the Bills' number 2 wide receiver. He was that from the second Roger Goodell read his name off the card. He is their starting slot receiver, and he will be number 2 on that team in targets, receptions, receiving yards. And he might even be number 1 in touchdowns next season from day one. So like that's what he is. He's the number 2 receiving option in that offense. And it's like his blocking against nickel defenders is way better than adequate. It's just you can't play him in line, but that's fine. That's why they have Dawson Knox. Like I saw people like after that, like, oh, the Bills, like, a luxury pick and taking a second tight end when you already have Dawson Knox. It's like, guys, you don't get it. They don't play the same position. Dawson Knox is the inline guy. Dalton Kincaid is now your starting slot receiver. And by the way, you can also play Kincaid on the outside when they want to do that. Like because he won there at Utah consistently when they were doing it. If you wanted, if Gabe Davis got injured, he actually might, like, you could actually just start him on the outside. Or you can just use it to spell him if you want to get Boise State kid Shakir. You want to get him in the game. You can do stuff like that, but the receiving skill with that kid is high level. The 5-6 years I've been doing this, he's the most skilled receiver that I've seen. And the hands, the like vice grips, he just doesn't drop anything. And it does, like, as long as you get it anywhere in here, he's coming down with the ball. And it doesn't matter who is around him. If he gets his hands on it, he's coming down with it. So you have all that different stuff going for you. But yeah, like the receiving utility, really good. I mentioned with Laporta, the only thing with his receiving utility is like, I don't know about the down in the field stuff. I don't really even care with him because you can just punt him with targets intermediate. He always gets open. Then he runs after the catch or whatnot. Kincaid, he'll beat you anywhere. He'll beat you short, he'll beat you intermediate, and he can absolutely beat you down the field. So yeah, people just need to sort of get their head off of the tight end designation. It's not helpful with Dalton Kincaid. He should almost be just listed as a wide receiver because that's what he is. He's a big slot who can also play on the boundary, but he will not be playing in line in the NFL.
I'm getting Moneyball vibes when Billy Bean is talking to Art Howe about playing Scott Hatterberg at first, and it's like, why I signed Dalton Kincaid for you to put him at slot receiver, and then Art Howe says, well, his blocking does not matter. He just gets on base. That's what it is. That's like the total allegory I'm getting when I talk to you about that.
Does that make Khalil Shakir Carlos Pena?
I think it would, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I think that's how it was, and now we just wait for Khalil Shakir to be traded to the Lions, right? I think that's
exactly right.
I'd have to watch the movie again. Okay, yeah. Let's move on and talk about the number 1 overall pick, Bryce Young. Everything I've read, everything I've heard, I shouldn't say everything, most everything I've read and heard, including from analysts like you, believe in the talent. He's going to be good. The biggest knock on him has been the size. It's been the durability. Are you concerned with Bryce Young's durability at the next level? Because if you're not, this guy should be a screaming hot, great dynasty quarterback.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm not at all. He senses bodies like the vision and the way he reads the field. Like that's how we typically talk about it, which he's fabulous. Like that's his thing. Like he's going to go into the NFL and be elite in the NFL at that immediately. But like also the bodies around him in the pocket. He is like Mahomes is a bit like this as well, where like he senses all the bodies around him and he's so comfortable just moving around them. Bryce Young, his entire game essentially is tailored around this. He wants to be in shotgun. and an even deeper setup than like regular shotgun, because he wants the space to maneuver around as a scrambler, but he doesn't typically leave he doesn't typically tuck it and run. That's not what he uses it for. He wants the wider field vision, but he also wants more of that runway because he wants to extend that play because he sees everything. Like if a receiver breaks off the route and there's any miscommunication on the back end, or if someone just can't, the sudden change of the receiver, like, oh, it's a extended play, like I'm going this way, anything like the ball is out slapdash quick and on the hands. Like his release is so fast, he sees it so fast. So like he can put the balls on hands of anyone at any point in the play, whatnot. Last year, like you watch the Alabama games, he was doing awesome in the situation he was given. But I think one thing, contextual piece that people missed about it is like, you always watch the Alabama quarterbacks and you're like, well, yeah, he looks good, but the offensive, he's playing behind 5 future NFL guys in the offensive line. And, they have 4 first-round receivers in the receiver room. Not this year. The offensive line fell off the shelf, and the receiving core was stunningly mediocre for Alabama. Like, especially because we've been used to watching the multiple first-round guys, and they took a swing on a couple guys in the transfer portal that didn't work out very well. They thought, a couple of their true freshmen the year before would take a step forward. They did not. And so, like, it was like Bryce Young and Jahmyr Gibbs. It was like the sort of the 2-man show there. But like Bryce Young was even better than he was the year before. Maybe not by the counting stats, but in terms of everything else per play, different stuff on target percentage, different stuff like that. He can't really help that balls were clanging off this crappy receivers that he was working with. So yeah, I mean, like he's going to be very, very good in the NFL. And to the durability thing, avoiding the sack, stuff like that. I'm talking about, like, as far as like sensing the rush, whatnot. That's certainly a factor in it. But the other thing is, I seen that kid, he started for 2 years, highest level of college football. Believe he missed 1 game over those, 29 or whatever, Alabama played those 2 years, 28, whatever it would have been. The game he missed, it was because of a sprained AC joint in his throwing shoulder. Now this, surprising nobody else was bringing this up during the pre-draft process, but that is an injury that always keeps quarterbacks in the FBS out for multiple weeks. And Bryce Young was able to return after missing just 1. I think it's just as plausible, especially because I think that kid is twitchy, both lower half and upper half. We always talk about twitch as like a, like a lower half thing and stuff like that. But like he is as well in his upper body. And like, I think of him as like made of rubber bands, sort of. And like, I sort of think that guy heals like Wolverine. Like that was my new working theory after he came back immediately from the AC joint thing, because you just seen it so many times over the years. Like kid gets that. It's like, yeah, he's out for a minimum 2 weeks, might be longer. But Bryce Young's like, yeah, I'll just skip the 1 and I'll come back.
We're getting into Moneyball and Wolverine in like a 5-minute, time period. That's fantastic stuff, Thor. Let's talk about his receivers. So Adam Thielen is not long for Carolina. DJ Chark has bounced around. Terrace Marshall's failed to show us anything in a couple of years. Laviska Shenault looks like kind of like a glorified gadget guy. If we're looking for the number 1 receiver long-term with Bryce Young, how close is Jonathan Mingo into fitting that role?
I don't think he'll ever be the first receiver there. I think the future first receiver for that team is not on the roster now. I think he's probably in college. Like Mingo, I think Mingo could be a solid number 2 in the NFL. I'd be stunned if Jonathan Mingo becomes like a standout wide receiver 1. He just like, yes, I get it with the frame and I get like the athletic testing numbers, but he don't move around as well as he showed in the pre-draft process on the field. He's not like a bum athlete or anything, but like you just don't see that. So like he's going to be like Mingo's going to be helped by the improved quarterback play for sure. Because last year he's playing with Jackson Dart, who he's like this former 5-star who gone to USC and he played as a true freshman. And like everyone was excited he went to Ole Miss last year, but he was not good. There a lot of times he's throwing over guys' heads or different stuff like that. So like I definitely concede that, and I will say Mingo ran better routes, like just the routes themselves in Mobile at the Senior Bowl when we were down there than I had expected. But like even when I was down there, I never had a second thought of like my supposition of what, like how he moved. It conformed to that from what I had seen on the field there. I was stunned when he tested like he did because he just doesn't move like that. But I will say he's a bit of a better route runner than I'd given him credit for. But I'm not one of those guys that believes he's going to become like, standout wide receiver one in the NFL. But I think it's like, a possession number 2 guy that also has a utility to go down the field. Like didn't get as many opportunities with that because of Mr. Jackson Dart, but he can also win downfield. We've seen that. That's what I would view him at. Like hopefully he can become like a really good number 2 NFL receiver. But yeah, I don't see him as being like but they don't have any ones on the roster right now, right? It's this theoretical idea.
Getting back to the NFC North, I want to talk about the Packers tight ends. I know you were not a fan of the Luke Musgrave pick, but you were a fan of the Tucker Kraft pick. Can you tell us, does that mean you think Tucker Kraft is actually going to be a better tight end in Green Bay than Musgrave?
For sure. Yeah. I absolutely think that. Musgrave only got drafted that high because his uncle is friggin' Bill, right? And then he had like the good testing numbers or whatever. But like, I mentioned before that Sam Laporta had 20 forced missed tackles last season. You want to know how many Musgrave had over his entire career at Oregon State?
Well, he hardly played. 2. That's the thing.
2,
yeah. But okay, but so and numbers don't lie. I get it. Are you looking? I mean, I guess I'm prognosticating a little bit here. I thought he was going to have a big final season there until he had the knee injury. I mean, again, super small sample size, 11 catches in 2 games. He left that second game hurt. Like to me, that was going to be his season. But you're looking at like what he did in years before, and just thinking like, man, I don't see from Musgrave what I see from Kraft. Is that what
I don't understand why, with no other prospects, do you give them all the benefits of the doubt that Musgrave gets from everyone? Like I like it's because like, well,
because of the bloodline, right?
I think so. I mean, like, so you have the athleticism thing. Look, I watched those first 2 games live, upsets of Boise State and Fresno State. Like, I get it. Like, I mean, he played really well, but you can't just be like, oh, the stuff before and like whatnot, and he would have been awesome that year. Like, you have to point at the past of like that kid didn't get on the field before then. And yeah, like I realized like the first 2 games that he was good and very well could have been the rest of the year. But like, let's just talk about the on-field utility. He has one like thing about his game that's very good that is a valuable trait in the NFL, which is I like his ability to get down the seam and like he like in terms of like body positioning, tracking the ball, and then like if he's towards the sidelines, like he's really crafty at like knowing where the sideline is and getting his feet in the right spot, different stuff like that. But that's about it. He is a terrible blocker. You can try to play him in line. He's going to get ragdolled by the power long guys out there. He does not change directions well at all. In the intermediate area, he doesn't create any separation whatsoever. So in the NFL, they're just going to be like, bro, we know what you want to do. You're going to try to go down the seam. And so we're going to sit back and we're going to get a head start on that. And if you want to try to do an intermediate thing, you change directions like the Suez Canal tugboat. Like I'll be able to jump that. Like, you're going to telegraph and I'll be able to jump it. And this is another reason why he didn't break any tackles. Like when he gets the ball, he's like this sort of big north-south target that isn't going to move off his spot whatsoever. So he takes some big hits when he's going down the field. Because exactly what, it's the opposite of Sam Laporta, like where you're like, like you can move at the last second. And if I don't hit him with everything I have, he's going to run over me. It is not the same with Musgrave. It's like, I know exactly where he's going to be. We're going to have a car crash right now. And he is going to go on the ground. So like, again, I can see that the downfield stuff, but like, yeah, if you're only a one-trick pony in the NFL, and even that one trick, we barely got to even see that, right? Because like you're mentioning the contextual stuff, but yeah, like I do think he'll be able to do that. But Tucker Kraft, he can be able to do way more stuff. Like he just is.
So and that's my question here, because he was the 7th tight end, I believe, 7th tight end drafted. I don't know where he fell in your pre-draft rankings. Now that you know the landing spots for these guys, where would you put Kraft among this tight end class?
I keep him. I think I had was Musgrave trying to think. I don't have it in front of me, but like,
Well, I know
think
you had Kincaid and Laporta ahead of him for sure.
Yeah, and then I had and you know, I think it was Laporta, Mayer, or I'm sorry, Kincaid, Mayer, Laporta, and then
I don't know where you were at on Darnell Washington or Schoenmaker.
oh, so I had Washington 4, and then I think Kraft 5.
Kraft is 5, okay. And that's where you
Musgrave maybe 6.
Would you keep Kraft behind Washington given Washington's tumble?
Well, in terms of fantasy, like even then, like Washington got to be down. Washington's not a great receiver. And like in the NFL, like he's going to need a major breakthrough with that. Like what he's awesome at, he's the third offensive tackle that's out there. But like Washington doesn't move like he tested either on the field. In particular, the agility thing. Like he does show that he's like a north-south load with the, and he's explosive as well. But like, he's another one that's just straight line when he gets the ball. It was funny. Like I'd read other people's scouting reports because like ever since I was like, I'm just obsessed with this stuff. So like, even though I do my own, like, I like to see what other people think. I saw so many times this spring, people being like, oh, Darnell Washington, he's a colossus. Once he gets the ball in his hands, and it's so difficult taking that. It's like, no, it's not. Darnell Washington, he broke very few tackles in college as well. It's just like he's just this really tall, huge target that's going downfield, and he doesn't move off his spot. So you can either just dive bomb his knees and he's going to go down, or else, like you can tango with him up top, but as long as you get him around the midsection, you're going to go down. Like he just doesn't break tackles. And the other thing with him is Darnell Washington only caught 2 balls that traveled 20 plus air yards in college over his entire career. And then you're like, oh, well, no problem. Like he's, this enormous target, like he'll dominate in the intermediate range. It's like, no, not really. He had a drop rate of like 11 in college, or 11 and a half, 12, even though his ADOT was super low because they never threw him the ball down the field. So like with him, it's like doesn't break tackles, iffy hands, doesn't win downfield, doesn't create any separation in the intermediate area. It's like, man, even as a safety blanket, it's like with him. But like, yeah, I mean, Tucker Kraft, Musgrave, certainly better receivers than him. I put Schoonmaker above him for sure. Fantasy. Hell, I might even put Zach Kuntz above him. I know Zach Kuntz got a ways to go because he was down in round 7, but like if I was in a dynasty draft, I think I would rather have Zach Kuntz than Darnell Washington. So, and Brenton Strange, he got drafted. That was a big time reach, but like he can do different stuff. He can move him around and he blocks, so he'll be out there all the time. But yeah, but going back to the point about Kraft, like I do think he's going to have a better career for the Packers than Musgrave. He can win in more spots on the field. And I think that he also has the athleticism. Tucker Kraft's mistake was last year at this time, there was a bunch of the big like blue bloods that were offering him bags of money to like have a mercenary year and then jump out like Alabama was one of them. There was others. He should have taken that bag of money because not only would he got in the bag of money, he would have had the spotlight and the platform and in particular proof of concept against good defenders. Like with him, I think it was he only had there was one game before last year where he played an FBS team, but last year they played Iowa, which was like, oh, this is going to be a great measuring stick because Iowa had a top 2 defense in the FBS last year, and then Kraft gets injured. So like we didn't get to see a ton of that. But he torched everyone he played. And like the only hard thing about his tape was like, it was so easy for him to get free and get wide open. And then he's just like running past people. It's like, that became the harder thing of his thing of like, well, when you have guys that he can't just blow by with the athleticism and, the route running needs to become more precise and different stuff like that. It's like, we just haven't seen it, but it's like, he has the athletic profile for all of it. He's good at all the different receiving stuff we've seen down at the FCS. It's like, if you're going to give Musgrave all the benefits of the doubt that everyone gave him, it's like, why aren't you going to give like Kraft one of them? I mean, Nick Saban was all over him last process, but Nick Saban, pretty good football coach. I think he gets it. So yeah, like I don't know. I just think Kraft's better.
There are a few better at what he does than Thor Nystrom. You follow him on Twitter at Thorku from Fantasy Pros, Betting Pros. Is fantasypros.com the best way to consume your content, or perhaps just doing that and following your Twitter feed from all the media spots are doing. Is that the best way to go about it?
Yeah,
Thor?
that and Twitter at ThorKU.
Thor KU. Got it. You're the man. I appreciate it. I know your time's valuable. Thanks so much for sticking with us for an hour tonight. We'll have to do this again sometime. You be good, man. Thank you so much.
For sure. Thanks for having me on, man. Appreciate you.
Thor Nystrom, absolutely, from Fantasy Pros, Betting Pros. We're going to step out, take a break. We'll get to the second hour of the show. Scott Connor from Destination Devy and, of course, Dynasty League Football. Charles Chill himself is going to be joining us. We're going to talk about some of his reaction to the NFL landing spots, and we're going to get into some Dynasty buys, sells, and holds. This is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show right here on the Better Sports Network.
The High Stakes Fantasy Football Show with Eric Balkman.
Better Sports Network. Collectible moments.
Everybody up here at U.S. Cellular. Sox 5 runs, 6 hits. The 2-1 to Bartlett. Swing, shot to short. Ramirez has it, throws. Bartlett picks the perfect game. His second no-hitter. People going crazy here at U.S. Cellular. He's mobbed by his teammates. A perfecto.
Now there's a steal by Bird. Underneath the DJ, lays it in. Right out, 1 second left. What a play by Bird. Bird stole the impounding pass. Laid it up to DJ. DJ laid it up at him. And Boston has a 1-point lead with 1 second left.
Out of the I formation on first down. Peterson to carry, looking for running room on the right side, has it to the 25, across the 30, across the 35, and out of bounds at the 40-yard line. Adrian Peterson has just gone over 2,000 yards for the season, the 7th man in NFL history to cross the 2,000-yard mark.
Well, a thundering ovation for number 66, Mario Lemieux.
Just the emotion I'm sure Mario is feeling in this place. You don't appreciate something until it's gone, and it's so great to have Mario back.
Yager turns around. Over to Lemieux. Mario Lemieux, his first goal in his comeback here tonight at the Mellon Arena. And the Penguins lead 3-0, and he is smiling like a butcher's dog. Mario Lemieux.
Oh, the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone. The Bears have scored, but the Bands are out on the field.
Pearson moves in front of the STP Dodge. Petty comes back to the inside. They almost touch as they move down low in the bank, and you're going to be side by side as they exit the bank and head for the finish line.
Richard Petty goes back in front. They both spin. They're in the wall. Petty is slamming into the wall. He's coming down toward the finish line. Will he make it? Pearson is still running. The winner is car number 21. An amazing finish. Richard Petty's car demolished the front end, as well as car number 21. An unbelievable finish, a terrible crash. David Pearson has won the Daytona 500. Leitner catches, comes down, dribbles, shoots, scores! Christian Leitner has hit the bucket at the buzzer! Pitched by Downing, swinging, there's a drive into left center field. That ball is going to be out of here. It's gone. It's 7-15. There's a new home run champion of all time, and it's Henry Aaron.
The most valuable player is Magic Johnson. 42 points, 15 rebounds, and 7 assists. He starts at center, plays forward and guard, and leads the Los Angeles Lakers to a world championship 123-107 over Philadelphia.
Whether you collect sports memorabilia, fantasy championships, or winning bet slips, talk about it on Better Sports Network.
It's the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on Better Sports Network.
Thursday night is fantasy football night right here on the Better Sports Network. You already enjoyed Quick Outs Fantasy Football with Coop, Andrew Cooper, and John and Pemba. We are live right now. We just had Thor Nystrom. I'm going to bring in my next co-host coming up here until 9 o'clock Eastern. That's when Dynasty Nerds with Garrett Price takes over. NFL free agency, trades, NFL draft, Dynasty leagues, best ball strategy. You're getting the best fantasy football analysts on bettersports.com, the Better Sports Network app, and, of course, streaming everywhere on social media at Better Network. The next guest I want to bring on, guest co-host, guy I've competed against in fantasy football, a longtime high-stakes player, a guy who, and I'm confused on this, and Scott, you can let me know. I don't know if you consume more podcasts or produce more podcasts, because I know you are listening to a ton of them. You're always trying to bring in as much information. into your head to try to make you a better fantasy player and a better fantasy analyst. You are the owner of Dynasty and Chill. Dynasty content featured at Destination Devy. Obviously, the trades in 5 podcasts, Dynasty League Football, and a guy who's won a slew of FFPC main event titles. He is at Charles Chill FFB on Twitter. Scott Connor, welcome aboard, man.
Balky, thanks for having me back, man. It's been 5 years since I've been on High Stakes Fantasy Hour.
Roughly.
Jay and I were on like 2018, I believe, because we talked Jamison Crowder, and definitely not a player that is around anymore. He's there, but he's not relevant anymore. But I remember that, and yeah, man, to your point about the consuming content, I always say I try to put in 25 to 30 hours of content a day. 3x speed, so wherever you're going to be able to listen to it faster than normal. And I try to just jam my head with as much as I can and retain 10% of it so I can produce my own content. That's the trick. Other people could do it. A lot of what I say is generated from ideas that I hear from other people, but glad to be here, man. This is the best time of the Dynasty season, especially because draft just happened. I was saying I was in 20 rookie drafts last week at one point, 21 to be exact, at one time. So I have, 40 tabs open on my computer at all times with the tracker sheet going, okay, where am I at in this one? Because you don't want to miss, right? Like, doesn't it feel like if you're in drafts and it just goes by, you may not have a pick for a round, but you're not watching the board and you're leaving some meat on the bone because what if I could have traded in? Or what if there was something available and I'm not paying attention because I have too many leagues? So I've really been diligent about taking this time to have every single one of them open, always looking at the chats, always looking at the boards, but it's been fun, but extremely hectic, but glad to be here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm glad to have you. And let me ask you this right up at the top. I've heard from some other high stakes players. They felt like during their Dynasty rookie drafts this year, there was less trading during the draft. Did you also experience that?
I don't know if there was less trading. There was less creative trading, meaning it felt like people knew what they wanted or they knew that they didn't want what was being offered or what was on the board. A lot of the trades I made were, quite frankly, just to get out and not have to make a pick. Getting out of ranges where I go, it makes no sense for me to add 5 players in this range of 15 picks in the draft. And then a lot of other ones, listen, depending on the format you're playing in, there were many times where I said, okay, I have super flex league without a heavy tight end premium. So I'm sitting here going, the only thing I ever want to draft is filler running backs or receivers or quarterbacks that hit certain draft capital. This year, those receivers and quarterbacks were gone in the first round. Then it's like, how many running backs were there? We'll talk about that. I'll bring that up in a little bit. But this year, there were a lack of running backs to choose from. Not just great landing spots, but literally a lack of bodies, which is something I didn't see coming. But many times I got to the 3rd round and I go, listen, I don't want to make those 2 third-round picks. I would rather have a future 3rd and a 4th-round pick because at least I can punt that value to the future and maybe use that at another point instead of just making picks, because it feels like at some point you're just making picks, putting players on your roster. If you're in shallow leagues, a lot of times you have to cut players just to make picks. Doesn't it feel much better to have a future 2nd or a future 3rd or something in the season to spend if you have an active league where you can actually buy something on the clock versus having to just add this player over and over and over? So I found myself trading out a lot, and a lot of times it was just get me to next year, give me the flexible capital instead of making picks.
That's a great point. And even if you're, like you say, you had 2 thirds, you trade a third, those 2 thirds for a 3rd and a 4th or whatever next year, at least you can kick that down the road and figure things out next year, and you can have your roster take shape a little bit better this year. That's a great point. Was there anything else that, from an ADP standpoint, a draft capital standpoint, anything that happened in your rookie drafts that you're like, wow, I didn't see this coming? I mean, I know you talked about the talent drying up. Was there anything else?
So 2 things that I've seen, and it's natural. It comes from a lot of analysts out there that are talking about, where to pick players, ADP. I think the biggest thing that people misunderstand is even in, like, say, the FFPC, right? The tight end position, it oftentimes gets overvalued because people are always chasing the elite tight end production, or what I call the elite WAR or warp production, above replacement versus the mean or versus the median. Everyone's chasing the next big tight end, right? But we also know, like, historically speaking, and this isn't just last year, the year before. This is pretty steady over like a decade or more. Really, you got to have like a top 4 or 5 tight end. Otherwise, it's just anybody else. And if I don't have a top 5 tight end, I know that I probably have to go down I have to carry at least 2, maybe 3, and I have to stream, and I have to try to stack, and I have to try to find an edge weekly to keep up with the people that have the elite tight ends. And sometimes we're not even good at picking out who they are. Sometimes we pick tight ends at tight end 3, 4, 5 in a given year, and then they fall into the streaming range. So I think the biggest thing this year that I saw is you get to the late first in drafts, and people go, I don't know who else to pick. So I should just pick Michael Mayer or Dalton Kincaid or Sam Laporta. And sure, I play in a lot of 2 tight end with 2 PPR for tight ends. So it's a massive premium, and there's scarcity because you have to start 2. That type of format, I'm all about. Go take the tight end as early as you want. But if it's just like an FFPC league, if you've played an FFPC Dynasty, it's real hard to carry tight ends if they don't hit right away. It's real hard to carry more than 2 of them ever on your team before you go, oh, man, one of these tight ends is going to have to be my cut. And it just feels like if you're using a first-round pick, I caught the end of Thor's discussion about Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave. It feels a lot better just going, I'll take a shot on Tucker Kraft in the 3rd versus drafting Dalton Kincaid at the 108. Because you have to be really right on that Dalton Kincaid pick, even if he becomes, Noah Fant or Dawson Knox or someone like that. That's a complete whiff if you took him with a first-round pick. And even if he has multiple top 12 seasons, if his multiple top 12 seasons, Balky, are tight end 8 and tight end 10, you probably wasted the value of that first-round pick. There's other things you could have done with it besides draft the tight end. So it's just the tight ends are getting pushed up, and the premiums are not the right place to be taking shots on it. Really, you got to hit on a top 5 tight end if you're using a pick on a tight end in this class. And a lot of people would go, I'll just draft Sam Laporta or Michael Mayer. I have major concerns about Sam Laporta, and people are just drafting him like, he's already going to be a difference maker. Even in Dynasty, the odds that he gets to difference maker range in Dynasty is just really low.
I think one of the things that, and I'll share a story about this as we get later on, because following what your sort of philosophy is in rookie drafts, I actually changed one of my picks that I was going to make. And then I was reading some of your stuff. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to flip it and I'm going to go with somebody else. I'll tell more about that later. But running backs versus wide receivers in rookie drafts, to me, you see all these people draft as many wide receivers as possible because, they have the longest shelf life, and we'll see what happens there. Running backs, the NFL devalues them. I might as well devalue them as well. I think there's an interesting a twist that especially high-stakes dynasty owners like you have made in regards to how you draft running backs in rookie drafts versus how you draft wide receivers and how deep you're willing to go on wide receivers to formulate your rosters.
Yeah, I think there's a misnomer with receivers, Balky, is you would say receivers have a quote-unquote longer shelf life, right? That's what the narrative seems to be. But I think really what it is good receivers have a long shelf life. Average receivers are receivers that just end up occupying a spot on a roster. Let's say you're one of the top 4 receivers on a team. You might have an average or even longer than average shelf life, but how much of it actually matters? Take a guy, I'll give you a perfect example. Joshua Palmer, right? Came in the league. He was a 3rd-round pick. Now, he didn't have the name coming into the league because nobody really thought he would be a 3rd-round pick. He wasn't one of the really sexy, like, college producers that everyone's like, oh, man, this guy's going to be a 1st or 2nd rounder. I have to get him. But he goes in the 3rd round. He goes to an offense that people like, a quarterback that people like, and he established a role. He established as the number 3 receiver on an offense where you go, okay, the number 3 receiver is a guy I'm going to keep on radars, even in shallower formats. He spends 2 years. Last year, he's relevant because both Mike Williams and Keenan Allen were injured for multiple times during the season. This year, you come into the season and you go, okay, Josh Palmer, even in like a 20, 25-man roster league, he was worth a roster spot. But it was still outside of that range where you go, okay, I know I can use him. But I have to roster him. I have to have him. He's worth something till you try to trade him and someone goes, I don't really want Josh Palmer. Right. There's no equity in why they would want him. But if you have him, he's hard to dump. So he literally, by 2 years in, is fitting the definition of a quote-unquote roster clogger. But then the word is, the team needs to get more weapons. So they end up drafting another receiver. So now what do you do with a guy like Josh Palmer? And it's no indictment on him. He's actually been pretty good when he gets a chance to play. But doesn't it feel like he's the prototypical receiver that people continue to take over and over and over? And if you do that for 3 straight years, every year you add Josh Downs or Marvin Mims, and you just keep doing that. The only out you have is I hit on the outlier. The Marvin Mims was Terry McLaurin. You know, the Jaden Reed was Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's the only out. If not, you're more likely to end up with a bunch of Rondale Moores, Terrace Marshalls, Josh Palmers, and now you're just clogging your team. And you've seen the rosters before, Balky. There's teams, 25-man rosters, they have 16 wide receivers. Right. And they can't cut any of them because for 3 years they've been collecting these guys that are they're nice names, they love their college profiles, or they like their situation. But you go, damn, when I get to the season, I'm having to start cutting these guys to pick up backup running backs because, man, backup running backs are what I'm using my fab dollars on. If one of those guys becomes available, sorry, wide receiver 12, you got to go. I'm going to pick up a backup running back, or I'm going to pick up a quarterback in Superflex. So alleviate that. You get into these drafts, and it's like, man, I'm not saying I haven't taken shots on some of these receivers that went late round 2, early round 3, but they're not a value. They're just there. They're guys. They're going to exist in every NFL draft. There's going to be 5 to 6 of these types in this range every year. I don't want to have to pick which one is going to be Terry McLaurin or Deontay Johnson or Amon-Ra St. Brown, because everyone will swear they had those guys higher than consensus. But go back and look at the receivers that have gone in those ranges the last 5 years, and it's just like yucky. I mean, 90% of them you go, yeah, that wasn't a great pick. So in lieu of that, why not take the backup running backs already before they become the backup running backs? Now, sure, you're going to hit on some. You're going to hit on some Tyrion Davis Prices, some Ty Chandlers, where it's like, yeah, they're not even the backup running back, unfortunately. But I'd much rather take that than just load up on every single receiver in this range, because if I need to use them, the hit from Chase Brown is higher than probably one of these running backs. So that it's just a theory. It's a team building thing. In the moment, you're going to prefer your guys a lot of times, but just from a macro view, running backs over receivers, unless they get top 40, top 50 draft capital. Otherwise, you have to make very, very specific exceptions for profiles in there.
And it's an opportunity thing too. Like with running backs, like you can have a guy that's just like whoever, and I'll tell you that the decision I made today, I was deciding between Puka Nacua, who I don't think we're going to talk about. We may or may not. I don't know. I was deciding between Puka Nacua on a team I already had a lot of receivers on, or this is a rookie free agent draft. Chase Edmonds was out there. And I'm like, okay, well, I kind of like Nacua given what the Rams' current receivers are like, but he was a late day 3 pick. Sure, he could hit. He could be the outlier, as you pointed out, or I could get this guy in Chase Edmonds, who, yeah, I know what he is. He's a known value, but as of right now, he's the backup in Tampa. And if he goes to the season as the backup in Tampa, and Rachaad White gets hurt at all of a sudden I can start Edmonds that week as a flex at worst, maybe as a second running back, and all of a sudden I've cashed in on the value of taking him in the 6th or 7th round or whatever it was in my rookie draft, as opposed to Puka Nacua, who I might have to cut before the season starts just to get to that point. So thank you in advance, unless Nacua, of course, turns out to be an all-pro this year. Then I hate you forever, Scott Connor.
Well, and you know what the real dirty truth is about the receivers that you're talking about? And Nacua is a major exception because he was even later than some of the ones I was talking about. But even when you get into the round 3, round 4 guys, if you're playing, especially like a portfolio of dynasty leagues, here's the dirty secret about the dynasty community at large. When a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown or Terry McLaurin has a good rookie year, what do they face going into the offseason, Balky? Man, they didn't get the capital. Everyone should be selling them at that point. You know, like if I can now get a first rounder for Amon-Ra St. Brown, well, I should sell him because the math says you probably don't want to bet on those guys long term. So you get this like rebound effect on the market to where, I use the example from 2021. Amon-Ra St. Brown was a 4th round pick, right? He had a great rookie year, 80 catches, 900 yards, but there were still people that were going, man, 4th round pick, not athletic, slot receiver only. Not that he's not good. Well, I think if you do what he did his rookie year, you're a good player. But man, if you can get a first plus, like I'll re-roll, I'll take a first for him, Rashad Bateman would have put up those numbers, and it would have been like top 10 receiver in Dynasty. We knew it. We knew he was a stud. And that's just simply the preconceived notions of both of those players and then what they did in their rookie years. So that's the other thing is when one of these receivers that you may love Josh Downs, and you think he went to a great situation, he's going to be the only slot receiver in Indy. There's probably going to be a window to where even if he's good and you're shaking your head going, yeah, I was on that, like Thor, I was on him before the draft. That's my guy. There's going to be a window to be able to buy him because he's going to be faded just a little bit because of what he was going into the draft or what his draft capital ended up being. So it's weird. Like, I'm never scared that if I miss on one of these guys that I can't go buy a couple, and it's not going to cost me what it would cost me if this was a first round receiver that blew up. You can't buy Garrett Wilson or Chris Olave. They're very hard to buy unless you want to give up multiple first rounders. But somebody that was a third or fourth round pick, I can probably get for a first and a third, or there's going to be more of a willingness for people to bet against him even after that really good rookie year. So you can get shares of them. You just have to be patient.
Let's talk players here. Tyjae Spears is a guy that I know a lot of people around after the Senior Bowl. He falls into a situation in Tennessee where he's backing up Derrick Henry. I don't know if he has the prototypical size. Well, I know he doesn't have the prototypical size that you would want as an heir apparent to Henry. They still have Hassan Haskins there in Tennessee as well. Can you give us kind of your thoughts on how you treated Tyjae Spears in your Dynasty rookie draft, Scott?
So in the drafts that started like the day of the NFL draft, I had some that were starting like Saturday night, Sunday morning. You had to react quickly. And I think in those, what you saw was Spears kind of just go off the board as RB 4, 5, 6, just kind of following the order that they got drafted. Then you got to like Monday or Tuesday and you started seeing the reports about the no ACL and he's not going to last long. And I've seen him fall behind Chase Brown in drafts. I've seen him fall behind all the other running backs that got drafted in round 3 and round 4, way behind Roschon Johnson in drafts. So now it's to a point where I'm like, I wasn't going after Tyjae Spears early on, but now I'm kind of like, I'm interested in him because listen, the running backs that are drafted there where he was anywhere between literally round 3 and round 6, I don't care what their outlook is 2 years from now. I'm not drafting guys like that because I think I'm making a long-term investment. That's another one of those fallacies. Like, I don't care if the guy's going to play past his first contract because I'm literally drafting a filler. I hope he ends up, best case scenario, he is a guy like, say, Darrell Henderson, where he gives me multiple years of, okay, he's viable in the spot that he is, but I don't really expect much more than that. So with that, like, I'm kind of back in on Tyjae Spears now, despite any of the medical stuff. He has, he probably has outs to where some other running backs don't. There's still a world where they trade Henry. There's a world where they use him in a weird way that no one really expected because they don't have any receivers. So I'm in on him relative to some of the other guys. I mean, I'm in on him over like Roschon Johnson or Chase Brown at their cost because those guys are going – Roschon Johnson's going a round higher than him in some drafts. And even Chase Brown is a 5th-round pick. People just assume, he's going to step right in behind Mixon. And, what? I'm a Bengals fan. I think there's a really good shot the Bengals just bring in another body. And they go, we don't have enough here. So I think he's a good value, and I don't care about the knee part. Like, if he gives me 2 years on my roster where – I have 6 to 8 chances throughout that 2-year period to maybe throw him in a lineup, that's worth what I'm spending on him. So that's my take. I really don't care about anything long-term with them. They're 1 to 2 year windows on these running backs.
What do you make of a Sedated Fork who's hanging out in the YouTube chat right now? He just had the opportunity to draft Tyjae Spears, which he did, to go with his Derrick Henry, right? But then another owner in the league basically offered him a future first-round pick for the Tennessee backfield. Spears and Henry this year, at least. We don't know what it's going to look like in 2024. Would you have done that too, Scott? Would you have taken the first-round pick back in exchange for Henry and Spears?
It's a fair offer. I think you're probably not ever getting more. I prefer actually to make deals like this. Like, I just made a deal where I traded Javonte Williams and a second for Samaje Perine and a first. And I'm just looking at it going like, all right, I don't really care about anything past this year. If Javonte Williams survives and he's a running back that's startable for me in 3 years, okay, I still got the insurance of that first-round pick back, but I'm basically just betting on short-term Perine versus Javonte. I'll take the bet short-term, give me the pick upgrade. So I'm okay with that deal. I would like to get probably the way I roster construct, I'd like to get a running back body back. I would actually prefer the Spears and a first for Derrick Henry, but he's obviously trying to get both of them to kind of protect himself. So the idea is good. I like getting running back bodies back. Anytime someone makes you an offer like that, where it's a draft pick for a player, give me a body and a draft pick, and I'll give you a player. And I'm getting the quote unquote leverage, where I'm just getting it can be Chase Edmonds. You know, as long as I have the roster capacity to roster him, give me more of those just to collect, especially in May. We don't know how these backfields are going to shake out. Half of them could be crazy by the time we get to the season. So that'd be the only thing. Counter with a body back.
And you talk about, you know, filler, you know, having these running backs in your roster. Like, you can go to like a Greasy Spoon or like some diner or whatever and get like spaghetti and meatballs or some kind of meatloaf or whatever. And you know what? You can still really enjoy that meatloaf or the spaghetti and meatballs, even knowing that they put some filler in that meat, right? And it can still be good. And I think that's the good thing about understanding in managing a dynasty roster, Scott. Not every player has to have this massive upside where you're like, well, look what he could be and look what his ceiling is. Like, if you want to consistently win in Dynasty, yeah, you're going to need those top 30 players on your team, but getting filler is still important, especially at the backup running back conversation. It doesn't look great on paper, but when you actually play it out on the field and you have those guys to deploy the certain weeks and windows during the season, that's how you win.
Yeah, and I'll give a shout out to one of your prior co-hosts, Jordan McNamara, and he'll talk about this. He goes, when you get to the offseason and you have a roster full of the Samaje Perines and Latavius Murrays, and like, you don't have the sexy team that everyone wants to trade with, you just kind of got to ride out the process till we get to where it matters to have pieces of all these backfields. Then your roster is viable. But it is a macro approach. You do have to accept that, you know, you are not going to have a lot of trade viable pieces on your team, pieces that Balky might want from my team. But when he looks at buying my Chuba Hubbard, you're going to go, oh man, that guy's not really worth much. He's just a, you know, backup / third string running back. I give you 2/4, you know, and I'm sitting here going like, it's not horrible to get some capital for some of those guys sometimes, but you have to pay a little more to buy them off my team because it's denting the master plan that I've created with the roster construction in the first place. So that's the only downside is, you know, you're not going to have all the players everybody wants when we get to the non-point scoring season.
How did you, and I believe, I could be wrong and I don't want to misspeak, but I feel like you and I were in a Kentucky KFFSC league together drafting on Super Bowl Sunday. And I feel like you took Zach Evans in that league. This was a redraft league, but I want to get your thoughts on Zach Evans pre-NFL draft. What did you think about him? And now that he's in Los Angeles behind Cam Akers, is he also behind Kyron Williams there? Can you give us your thoughts on Zach Evans for 2023?
Yeah, so pre-draft, I'm somebody that's a very data-driven player, so I try to listen to people like Thor and Ray GQ. Shout out to Ray Garvin, who runs Destination Devy, where I do all of my Dynasty content. You know, he's one of the guys that I trust when it comes to watching players, you know, trust when it comes to actually watching players and what they can actually do. And his perspective on Zach Evans he did a film session on Zach Evans, and he wasn't the only one that's talked about this, but you know, he wasn't really impressed. And then when you start digging deeper into some of the data, you know, without better draft capital, and, you know, Zach Evans only weighed in at his pro day, I believe, 208 pounds. So, I mean, what is his out? He's not an early down running back. He's not a pass catching running back. There didn't really be an out for Zach Evans. So I wasn't a fan of him. Then he gets drafted in the 6th round to the Rams, and he's behind Cam Akers on what's probably a bad offense. Now, to be fair, for those that are probably going, I like Zach Evans' spot, I have to acknowledge that Zach Evans is probably a backup running back on the Rams, or at least he's going to get all the opportunity to be. And I'm not lower on running backs that went in the 6th round versus running backs that went in the late 4th, 5th round. I mean, they're all the same to me. They're all entering training camp, entering the preseason with a shot. And all I'm looking for is, do they make a team? One of my hashtags is any running back on a 53-man roster. I'll roster in Dynasty. So I didn't like Zach Evans. I hated his draft capital, didn't love his landing spot, but I have to also respect there's a chance where, the Rams were pretty much done with Cam Akers, Balky, at a point, whereas like you never thought he was going to play for the Rams again last year. So why don't we see a world where Zach Evans gets a chance just to see what they have over the back half of the season? So I think you probably have to keep him on the radar with the backup running backs that you're even going to draft in redraft leagues. Like he still needs to be drafted, even if he ends up being the third running back. Like he's good enough to where if he gets a shot, I'm fine having him on roster. So I'll say I'm actually kind of higher on him now than I was pre-NFL draft because everyone else just faded him because he got 6th-round draft capital on a bad team.
And he's going, and that's how he's being drafted in the Fantasy Pros Championship too, Scott. Running back 58 at the 1405, behind Mostert, behind Abanaconda, behind Jerome Ford. He's right ahead Kareem Hunt and Leonard Fournette, 2 guys that are not on teams currently right now. So that's what you're looking at with Zach Evans. I can get on board with that for sure. I'll tell you what. We've been talking a lot about Dynasty Fantasy Football here. And remember, you can register for Dynasty Startup Drafts at myffpc.com from the $100 level all the way up to $5,000. You compete against guys like Scott Connor. We've been doing Dynasty for nearly a decade, well over 1,200 leagues. I think it's over 1,300 now. Not a single one has ever folded. So if you're looking to play Dynasty 365 days a year, go to myffpc.com. When we return, I want to get Scott's thoughts on Rashee Rice in Kansas City. I also want to talk about, he does a great series, does Scott, for Dynasty League Football about buys, sells, and holds in Dynasty. I have several players I want to get his thoughts on, including DeAndre Swift, DJ Moore, Greg Dulcich as well. Just sort of the tight end situation in Denver in general. This is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on Fantasy Football Thursday on the Better Sports Network. He is Scott Connor at Charles Chill FFP from the Dynasty and Chill from Dynasty League Football. And, of course, Destination Devy. I'm Eric Balkman, HSFF Hour, RotoViz HSLD, the FFPC. We'll be back right after this.
The High Stakes Fantasy Football Show with Eric Balkman.
The Detroit Lions select Sam Laporta, tight end, Iowa.
Had to go with your boy Sam Laporta there to pair with TJ Hawkinson.
Sammy. I couldn't double down on rookie tight ends. I think that would take it. That's taking it a little too far.
This could be one of the most exciting rookie tight end classes in a while, just based on the archetypes of these guys, of the Dalton Kincaids, of the Sam Laportas. Obviously, Green Bay drafted 2 themselves with Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave. So after Kincaid, I would say is probably the consensus with tight ends. Like, who do you like as far as the best ball, like end of best ball? Do you like Laporta, or is there anybody else you like more?
I do like Laporta. We're looking for guys that can be a top 2 target on their team. So any path, any argument you could make, right? So you can make the argument that Dalton Kincaid is going to be a top 2 target with after Stephon Diggs. You can make an argument that with Jamison Williams suspended, now Sam Laporta is just going to play straight up wide receiver. He looks like a wide receiver. Why can't he line up out wide at split end, right? It's like Marvin Jones and Amon-Ra St. Brown. I would also throw another name in the ring, and I don't mind, since we're doing this for the fans, for the kids. He's still on the board. Luke Musgrave on your Packers. They're not super loaded at wide receiver. We like the guy Reed they drafted, but you never know. So why can't Luke Musgrave be a big slot? In fact, they drafted 2 tight ends, Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave. Tucker Kraft is more of an inline guy. They might just go 2 tight ends right away. Tucker Kraft inline, Luke Musgrave in the slot. Why can't he be a target monster for Jordan Love? So those are the guys, those are the conditions that you need for a rookie tight end to succeed. They need to not only be the best pass catching tight end on the team, but a top 2 pass catcher on the team outright. That's how you get Kyle Pitts. Evan Ingram as a rookie was top 5 because Odell Beckham Jr. hurt his knee 4 weeks into the year. So that's the formula. We're looking for guys that can actually be a top target right away. Otherwise, we're playing the sit and wait long-term game, which is what you're doing with guys like Michael Mayer.
Stakes Fantasy Football Show on Better Sports Network.
Attention, Better fans. You can have the Better Sports Network newsletter emailed to you every single day. The only place to get our daily Better Bet, plus exclusive offers, program alerts, special events, and, of course, our top moments. Register for free right now at bettersports.com. I am Eric Balkman from the FFPC, the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, being joined tonight on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. Don't go anywhere, by the way. Garrett Price and Dynasty Nerds coming up right after we're done. It is Scott Connor at Charles Chill FFP. Then you're looking at Destination Devy for his content, Dynasty League Football as well. A Dynasty maven, great Dynasty mind. And if you needed any other proof from how deep Scott gets into the weeds with Dynasty Fantasy Football, just watch the last half hour. We had a lot of great stuff there. I want to kick things off before we get into sort of the veteran aspect of Dynasty Fantasy Football. The last thing I wanted to ask you about, Scott, was Rashee Rice over in Kansas City. Everybody kind of freaked out on again, I don't want to say everybody, but a lot of people freaked out on Twitter based on some rookie minicamp stuff that we saw, some video. Still got Kadarius Toney there, Sky Moore still there, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and some guy named Travis Kelce. Is Rashee Rice going to be a thing in Dynasty Fantasy Football, or is he one of these receivers that you're kind of like looking at not drafting because of the draft capital?
It's a loaded question, but the funny thing about Rashee Rice is, yes, he did get a little bit of a bump. Looking at the highlights, the early throw from Mahomes. I mean, everybody saw that, but we haven't seen the just absolute push up the board of Rashee Rice in a lot of leagues. At least I haven't seen it to where it's like, I don't care if he got drafted in the late second round, I'm putting him up into the first round of rookie drafts. I think people have kind of tempered that. I mean, we got burned by Mecole Hardman, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Sky Moore. I think that Chiefs hype is probably more hype than it actually is substance at this point. And I've joked a couple times, like, you know, people are letting Rashee Rice fall into where he probably should go based on his draft capital. And he'll be the one that smashes. And we're just like, wow, we should have been taking him in the first round ahead of Jaden Reed, ahead of Jonathan Mingo, you know, those types of players that are typically going right around or even higher than where he is. So I'm not saying I'm in on him because he doesn't fit the criteria of what I look for. I really, Bulky, looking historically, I want a receiver that gets top 40 draft capital. And if they don't have that, I'm willing to make exceptions for early declare players and players that produced a ton in college. So this year it would be Marvin Mims, Josh Downs. Like those would be the two where I go, okay, I'm in 50 leagues. I'm going to make sure I get those guys in a 1 or 2, not 5, not 10, you know, not taking them every time I'm on the clock and they're there, but a couple. But then you got, you know, Mingo, you got Tillman. I'm okay just kind of passing on those guys and betting on the back end that if they're good, I'll wait to see if they're good and then I'll buy back in. So, hey, I think the other thing that to think about in Dynasty that people don't factor in a lot of times when they make picks, you know who the guys were pre-draft that had a lot of name cachet? The Kayshon Bouttes, the Sean Tuckers, the Zach Evans. People have been talking about those guys for 2+ years. So I don't care if they went and drafted where they did. If I can pick one of those guys at cost, like really cheap, I'll take them because all it's going to take is one Sean Tucker highlight run and people will take the undrafted free agent Bulky and they'll buy him from you. You probably can get a 3rd round pick for him. All it takes is one play. A lot of other guys, you know, Puka Nacua, it's going to take a lot more for him to be worth somebody you can flip than Kayshon Boutte. So for that reason, there's a reason to draft him. And that could be the reason to take some shots on Rashee Rice. Like if he looks good in preseason, any reports of a connection with Mahomes, even if you don't want to ride it out to see if he's actually good, there's probably going to be a secondary market to sell him. So you got to get a couple shares, I think.
Yeah, and especially if you're in that many leagues, yes, it makes perfect sense to try to get a player like that on a couple of them, as you pointed out. I want to get into your buy, sell, hold pieces that you've been writing for Dynasty League Football. DynastyLeagueFootball.com is where to find them. I want to center in as many players as we can here. I'm going to kick things off with the guy who started the NFL draft in Detroit and ended the NFL draft in Philadelphia. That's DeAndre Swift. No Miles Sanders there anymore. What do you think about Swift in Philly? What are you doing with him in Dynasty leagues?
Yeah, it was a nice whirlwind for DeAndre Swift, right? From the Thursday when Gibbs got drafted to, if you have Swift, your hearts are broken and you're crushed. To by the time we get to Saturday morning, everyone's excited because now he has an even better landing spot than he did, you know, two days ago when he was 3rd string running back on the Lions. So here's the thing with Swift. If you can leave what you think he should have been in the past and realize that he's probably not going to be a 20 opportunity a game player, that's never going to be him. He's actually really impressive. Like currently, if you take players that have played since 2016. Points per opportunity, so targets and rushes, he's third in the league. Guys ahead of him, Austin Eckler and Christian McCaffrey. So people go, oh, he looks a lot like those guys. Yeah, we don't treat him like that. We treat him like he's treated in Dynasty before this Philly trade like he was 1 foot out of the league. And instead it's like, man, this could be the next. I only need 12 to 14 opportunities. And that's not, I don't care if he rushes the ball. Give me 5-6 targets a game. If I can get 13 opportunities, which is right around what he averages for his career, actually 14.2 through his first 4 years or 3 years, I'm probably going to get top 20 running back production. Am I ever going to have a top 5 season out of him? No, because that usually requires efficiency, a lot of opportunity, and just sheer volume, a sheer workload. But I think, RB 10 to 15 is more than possible just based on his receiving game. So I think he's a buy. The only problem is he goes to Philly now, and people like that. Some people probably had more than they did before. So the buy window was 36 hours, where you could have maybe swooped in with like a second and a third and bought him. Now he goes to Philly, and people are trying to trade him for, mid-first. And I'm like, I'm not buying a running back at that price, especially one that I don't think has a top 5 ceiling. So it's I like him though. If you can get him like in a startup draft, if you can kind of build around him as like your RB2 or even RB1, I'm okay with it. I think he's undervalued and he's underrated for what he's done thus far in his career.
I wonder if I can get, if I can look. Yeah. Okay. So I do have a decent sample size, 16 FFPC drafts here, Dynasty drafts. DeAndre Swift, running back 20 at the 602 in a startup. And you'd be on board with that price, right, Scott?
Yeah, because I think some of the other guys you're going around that range, not that they probably can't put up the same numbers short term, but I could see him being somebody that kind of lingers in this range for longer than some of those other guys do. There's some guys like J.K. Dobbins. Yeah, I don't really want to bet on him probably more than 1 or 2 more years, So I think he's stable. It's just if you're chasing a guy that's going to get a ton of carries and have a 325 plus opportunity season, this is the wrong player. And that's what people hoped when he came out of Georgia, when he was a 2nd round pick. Not going to happen. If you can accept that, honestly, what's the difference between him and Tony Pollard? Now, Tony Pollard last year in Dallas versus Tony Pollard's like projected workload this year, it's a little different, but Tony Pollard historically and DeAndre Swift are basically the same player. Yet people love Tony Pollard and they're going, I don't know about Swift.
Well, and there's expectations that went into that too, and certainly some draft capital where we've been chasing the Swift draft capital as Dynasty players for a while. Pollard is like, he's been so great because the people that picked him up in rookie drafts or what have you, they've seen that return on investment, threefold, fourfold, tenfold, whatever it's been. And that's the difference, right? Because we're disappointed in Swift because of expectations based on NFL draft capital, and we're pleased as punch with Pollard. And that goes into it, like you can exploit that in Dynasty leagues too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you have to look for these players. I think with running backs, it's important to, in the past, we've been way too focused on volume, opportunity. And we've seen the NFL, the way they're going, most of these teams, their goal is to say, okay, we have X amount of opportunity for our running back room. We're going to probably try to split it up. Most teams are at least 2 ways, if not 3 ways. So I just want chunks of that. I want the good. If you tell me there's going to be one phenomenon, Balky, that doesn't get talked about a lot is over the last 3 years, we've slowly seen the rise of these players that are able to produce like in a points per game perspective in like the RB2 range. That number has increased the last 3 years. At the same time, the high-end production, you remember the days of David Johnson, Todd Gurley, Le'Veon Bell. They're putting up 25-plus points per game. That nobody can do that anymore. There's probably 2 or 3 players in the league that can do it, and it's Barkley, McCaffrey, and they need to stay healthy, and they need to play 80-90% of the snaps, and they need to get 350, 400 touches. Like, that's probably not realistic for a lot of the guys coming in, even Bijan Robinson. Like, it's probably not a realistic outcome. So you're seeing a lot more guys in this range where it's like, yeah, that player averaged 12 points per game. Now, how did he do it? Half the games he was the backup, or half the games he wasn't involved. But the other half, you were able to start him. You were able to spot start him. So within that big chunk of running back, RB 10 through 50, I want the efficient guys in that range. And Swift fits that criteria. So I don't want the guys I don't want the Brian Robinsons. Brian Robinson and DeAndre Swift's projection totals for this year probably aren't that far off. But you look at Brian Robinson on a per opportunity versus Swift, like I'll bet on the Swift 10 out of 10 times. Not even close.
We've talked about having a short window focus in dynasty leagues, especially at running back today. What about for receiver? Because DeAndre Hopkins had the season last year where it was kind of, he got off to the late start because of the suspension. And now this year, he might get off to a late start. I don't know what your thoughts are. I haven't crunched the numbers on Colt McCoy and DeAndre Hopkins. But in dynasty leagues right now, knowing that he's not going to have Kyler Murray, or we don't think he's going to have Kyler Murray to begin the 2023 season, is he a buy, sell, or hold in dynasty for you, Scott Connor?
I think at this point, now that the reports are he's not going to be traded, which we'll see. But I think that people are everyone's excited for where is he going to go? Is he going to go to Buffalo? Is he going to go to Kansas City? Is he going to go to one of these places where it's bad process to send a first-round pick for a 31-year-old receiver? But if he would have gone to the Chiefs, people would have been doing it. They would chase 1 year production, no questions asked, and a lot of people would have supported it. I think now that he's going to stay in Arizona, there's going to be some fatigue on that offense this year. And Balky, what if Kyler Murray does play and he can't run and he just throws it to DeAndre Hopkins a lot? Like, that's in the range of outcomes. And then also it's going to be a bad team. It probably is going to be a bad team. But I think because people are deflated that he's not getting traded, that's when I'll be willing to buy. And I'm willing to buy with the expectation of I don't care how long he lasts. I'm buying strictly for this year. I'm almost treating him like I don't have enough receivers to cover my flex positions for this season. I'm making a 1 year bet. I don't care what he is next year. I don't care how long his career lasts. It's the same as buying a running back, basically. So if I can get him for 2 second rounders or something like that, it's literally like renting a running back for 1 year. It's a sunk cost. I get the points or I don't get the points.
Yeah. And anybody who's trying to rebuild and maybe wants to cash in on those picks, maybe that's who you target in your league. You got to see who has Hopkins, and if it's in a team in that spot, send out the offer. DJ Moore, I think, is on the flip side here. You don't like DJ Moore. I think he's a sell for you, right?
So I've always liked DJ Moore, but I think the problem is you look at a lot of the advanced efficiency numbers with DJ Moore. He's always been better than what his fantasy production has been. And it's always, literally he's the poster child of, we just need to get him an efficient quarterback. That's it. Not even a good quarterback. If he would have played his whole career with Kirk Cousins or even a lower end like Derek Carr, Jimmy Garoppolo, he probably would have been even better for fantasy than what he's been. His numbers track very similarly to a lot of other receivers where you go, CeeDee Lamb, that's a really good receiver, but you put him and DJ Moore side by side, literally the difference has been CeeDee Lamb's had Dak Prescott and DJ Moore hasn't. Yet in Dynasty, one of them is wide receiver 3, and one of them is, oh man, let me sell him now because he changed teams. This is my opportunity to get out for the 5th year in a row. I think the problem is now his one move happened, right? He signed with the Panthers. That was deflating. Then he gets traded to the Bears, which I like the Bears offense, but it's not an efficient high volume offense. It doesn't check either one of those boxes. So I'm willing to bet against DJ Moore because there's a lot of other receivers that are in the same range that I can squint and say, I'd rather have Brandon Ayuk over DJ Moore. I could see a Brock Purdy offense being efficient, Brandon Ayuk easily outperforming DJ Moore. But I think they're very similar. Same with Jerry Jeudy. Those guys are kind of all in the same group, but he's already had his moments where his situation has changed. I don't see it changing again for a couple of years. So if he's top 20 receiver in terms of value, then I think he's a sell.
I want to move on to tight ends here while we have some time. It's been interesting for Denver. We heard about Albert Okwuegbunam. This is going to be a guy to watch out for coming in 2021, right? And then Greg Dulcich gets drafted, and Greg Dulcich is there. Now we're hearing that maybe Sean Payton isn't the biggest fan of either one of those guys, especially Dulcich. He goes out and gets Adam Troutman. For Dynasty, for all 3 of those guys, how do you sort of approach that? And we're talking about guys that I know aren't normally on Dynasty rosters for you because of, especially shallow rosters. It's difficult to hold any of those guys on your roster. But maybe for FFPC Premium, people are finding a way to do it. Okwuegbunam, Dulcich, and Troutman, Scott. How do you handle those guys right now?
I mean, I think the good news is Troutman and Alberto are pretty much like just throw-ins. A lot of times you can just pick them up or you can get them for nothing. Dulcich, I've been anti-Dulcich since the offseason because I think we get stuck in this trap to where the tight end landscape is so bad that we just automatically elevate the guys that are new that just came in last year. And to be fair, I will give the 2022 tight end class credit. We had like 6 or 7 rookie tight ends that came in and looked like they immediately belong in that like second or third tier of, okay, they're not top 8. They're not even, they may not even be top 10, but they're right on the fringe. Like you could argue there was 7 rookie tight ends last year, top 10 to 25 in terms of how you would tier them in Dynasty. But what happens is we elevate them and we go, oh, well, Greg Dulcich, at one point he was tight end 9 in Dynasty this year. And it's not because he deserved tight end 9. It's because you go down the line and you try to rank him and you go, there's nobody else to put there. So just bet against those guys. The track for a tight end isn't just, well, second year they have to get 20% better than they did year 1. And then year 3, they're going to get even better. And then year 5, he's going to be George Kittle. Like, that's not how it works. We've seen a ton of guys come in, they flash, but then they just kind of level off and they either settle in that, like, their streamable range or they fade out. But rarely do they rise up to the level where it's like, this is a true difference maker. So Dulcich, Chiga Okonkwo is another one. The other thing that I've heard, I'll give a shout out to Hayden Winks with Underdog, who has talked about this a bunch the last couple of days. There's a serious worry with these tweener tight ends. Sam Laporta, Dalton Kincaid, Dulcich and Chiggy fit that. They're athletic. Most of them are. Chiga Okonkwo isn't really. He's fast, but that's it. They're athletic, and you hear this narrative, oh, man, they're the ones that are going to run all the routes. They're going to play out of the slot. You hear that stuff constantly. But here's the problem. Teams look at a guy like Dulcich, who's 240 pounds, or Sam Laporta, 6'3", 244. Like a team, that is not a full-time tight end to a team. They are going to take that guy off the field a decent chunk of the game, which now means, okay, he's only playing 60% of the snaps. They better be awesome at drawing targets. Otherwise, the math just doesn't line up. So Hayden's talked about that. The reason that everyone's drafting Dalton Kincaid is he's going to play the slot for Buffalo. But I don't really want that. I want the Dawson Knox role where he's playing 80 to 90% of the snaps with Dalton Kincaid's skills. That's what you really want. The Bills go, well, we don't have that in Dawson Knox, so we drafted the other part of it with Dalton Kincaid, and we're just going to play them together. But that's not good for fantasy. And the reality is if you get the Dawson Knox usage with the Dalton Kincaid skills, you got Mark Andrews, George Kittle. Like, it's hard to find those guys. So I think we just get caught up in these athletic tight ends that are going to play this specific receiving role. Really, that's not what you want. I mean, look at Denver last year. How many tight ends did they play? And you go, why are they playing Eric Tomlinson and Eric Saubert? Give Dulcich the ball more. But that's the damned if you do, damned if you don't with these tight ends. So I think he fits that criteria. And a lot of the rookies that we're hyping up, they're coming in the league. They're not full-time tight ends. I don't want my tight end blocking, but I want my tight end out there all the time.
Right.
And I think Dwayne McFarland, if you know Dwayne, he's been big on this. Sure, you want a certain route run rate and stuff like that, but the biggest predictor of tight end production is just how much they play. I want the guy that's out there all the time. By accident, he's going to get some targets. By accident, he might break a play where other guy might not even be on the field. So that's my concern with Dulcich and a lot of the other guys that are coming into the league right now.
I want to, as long as you mentioned Chiga Okonkwo, I want you to talk a little bit about what you think his role is going to be in that passing offense this year. And then I also want you to just give us the skinny on, Tannehill's kind of whatever. Malik Willis at this point is kind of whatever. But what about Will Levis in Dynasty League? So if you could tell us a little bit about those two Titans, Okonkwo and Levis, and how you're approaching them, again, for Dynasty Leagues.
Yeah, so Chig, I've been an anti-Chig Okonkwo guy for a long time. Anybody that's used the RAS score tool, RAS.football, it's a really good tool to look at. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's RAS, relative athleticism score. And Chig Okonkwo, he is an outlier. Not saying he can't have this specialty role where essentially he's playing slot receiver. And, you've probably heard how awesome he was last year from like a yards per route run basis and a targets per route run basis. Now, those are efficiency numbers, especially the targets per route run. But we also know that targets per route run is only so good when your targets for the team in a game are super, super, super low. Who cares? Bulky, you're getting 30% market share. You're getting, I don't know, 9 targets a game, but it's only on 30 attempts. And when the team's only throwing it 22 times a game, I don't care if you're at 30%. That's not enough relative to guys where their offenses are throwing it 40 to 50 times a game. So Chig's an outlier. He's a guy, he's 6'2". There has never been a tight end that's had a top 12 season that's been 6'3" or under. And that's shocking to people. They go, oh, it doesn't matter. He'll be the outlier. I play Dynasty based on data. I'm not betting on a 6'2" tight end that's sub 240 pounds. They just drafted a tight end that is also pretty athletic, Josh Wiley, in the 5th round. 6'6", 250 with a 9 RAS score. Last year they played Austin Hooper and Jeff Swaim. Like, there's always going to be 1 or 2 of those guys playing with Chiggy Okonkwo and stealing half of the snaps. So he better be the most efficient and yak monster tight end ever to probably hit anything close to what people want. So he's an outlier, not betting on it.
What about Will Levis and like a super flex draft? Are you a believer?
So I went to Kentucky. I love Kentucky. Huge Kentucky fan. Was kind of shocked to see Will Levis fall out of the 1st round, but looking more back at it, sounds like it was a math thing. There was only a couple teams. I've seen people. I don't know if you've seen people say Richardson would have fallen if that he wouldn't have gotten picked because there was only a couple teams that were willing to pick him. But here's the take on Levis. I think at some point he gets in there, but his draft capital doesn't predict any future opportunity for him. I think he was the perfect 2nd round pick for them because if he's not good, there's no qualms about replacing him quickly. That 2nd round draft capital they used, done so. So I don't think it really impacts their team this year. I wouldn't expect much better efficiency or volume for him, even if he gets in there. So just who wants the Titans offense? So I'm not really a fan.
We are big time fans of Scott Connor, who you follow on Twitter at CharlesChillFFB, the Destination Devy, Dynasty League Football. Anything else that we could consume more Scott Connor content, Scott?
Yeah, I'll give a shout out to Dynasty Trades in 5. We live stream every Tuesday night on YouTube. It is literally just trade theories, trade strategy, and trade questions for an hour and a half. Sometimes we go 2.5 hours, try to get all the questions in. We're going to be doing a marathon stream here coming up. We're going to try to go for way longer than an hour and a half, put it that way. I don't know if it's going to be 5 hours, 8 hours, but yeah, that show has grown a ton. Every Tuesday night we live stream 8:30 on YouTube. Check that out if you like Dynasty talk and just literally anything in all Dynasty. If you like this show, you'll definitely like that.
Scott, thank you so much, man. I appreciate it, dude. We'll do this again sometime real soon.
Appreciate you, Balky.
Thor Nystrom, Scott Connor, and producer Anthony Rivera deserve some shout-outs tonight. I'll give them all 3 of them right now. Thank you so much. We're back 7-6 Central next Thursday with Tom Strachan from Fantasy Pros, straight out of the UK. We're going to talk with him about the Fantasy Pros Championship. Remember to check out myffpc.com, not only for the Fantasy Pros Championship and the FFPC main event, 2 contests where you can win a $1 million grand prize, but the best ball tournament, the Superflex best ball tournament, and of course, Dynasty startups going on there as well. $5 fantasy football on myffpc.com. Garrett Price and Dynasty Nerds are up next. Thanks for watching.